I want to tell you about a meeting that ended about 4 months ago. Normal meeting, company we now work with, they got a call with an outside party. They went through the entire agenda, they said their goodbyes, and the other side dropped off. And then they kept talking, which is what everybody pretty much does. You wrap the call, the outside people leave, and now it's just your team. So you say the real things, what this is going to cost, who you're actually working with, the relationship on how it's actually like, and what you're worried about. The problem was that the AI note taker was still in the room and nobody hacked anything. Nobody clicked a bad link. Nobody broke a policy because there was no policy. The note taker did exactly what it was built to do. Listened, it transcribed, it summarized, and then it did the helpful thing. It emailed the notes to everyone who had been on the call, even the ones that left. So here's the part I keep coming back to. They couldn't take it back. There was no undo. They could not redact it. They could not recall it. They could not pretend it didn't happen. The send had already gone. Their internal conversation, their cost, the relationship, all of it was sitting in somebody else's inbox. That was a very difficult conversation to have with them. So here's my question for you, and I want you to actually answer it before this video is over. Right now today, who is running AI on your company's information? Not your team, everybody else. Your bookkeeper, your marketing agency, your outsourced help desk, the consultant who has all your files, or at least some of them that could be a problem if in the wrong hands. If you cannot answer that, you are not behind. You're just in the same place as almost everybody else. But you should know that that is where you are. So let's talk about it. Now, welcome back to the Digital Dilemma. I am Nick Dreyfus, Vice President of Business Development here at i-NETT. And before we go one step further, I need to tell you where I'm sitting because this changes how you should hear the rest of this. We deploy AI for a living. It is what we do. We're not the people who show up to tell you that AI is dangerous and you should wait. We actually think that waiting is going to be the more expensive mistake down the road. So we have said that on this show more than once. This is not an anti-AI episode. This is an episode about the fact that most companies already have an AI program. They just didn't approve it. They did not budget for it, and they didn't see it. And that program has two halves. The first half is inside your building, your own people using tools you never approved on data you would never have handed out on purpose. Everybody talks about that half. We're going to spend about 5 minutes on it because there is one specific thing about that almost nobody does correctly, and it's a piece of paper. Second half is the outside of your building, your vendors, your agencies, your contractors, the outsourced everything. All the companies you already send your information to as a normal part of doing business. That half is bigger and it is less discussed. And in my opinion, it's one of the ones that's going to generate the biggest lawsuits in the coming months. Now, we're going to send most of this episode there. So let's start with the inside. This is what actually is happening inside companies right now. There's a pile of research in this from this year. And I want to be clear that this is third-party research. This is not our data. Depending on which study you read, somewhere between 45 and 60% of workers say they are using AI tools their employer has not approved. One survey put it around 2/3. And of the people using unapproved tools, roughly 70% said they had put sensitive material into them. Customer records, employee records, internal documents, source code, proposals. Pick whichever number you want to believe. They all say the same thing. Your team's already using AI. The only question is whether you know about it and they typed it and what they typed into it. Now, here's what most people get wrong. And I want to push back on that instinct. The instinct is that this is the discipline problem. Somebody broke a rule. We need to crack down. I do not think that is what happened. What actually happened is that your people had to do a job. They found a tool that made it faster, and nobody had given them a sanctioned option. When the same study asked people why they went around IT, the top answers were not defiance, it was convenience, it was pressure. And a third of them say the company simply doesn't offer what they need. That is not an employee problem, that's a procurement problem. Your team was ahead of you and you were slow, and they solved it themselves. I'm not mad at those employees in this story. I think, at some point they were trying to do the right thing. But that brings me to a piece of paper. And this is the part I want you to actually write down. Almost nobody signed an acknowledgement from each individual employee that names which AI tools are permitted and which are not. That policy sitting on a shared drive, not a slide, in all hands 2 years ago. Not everybody knows we do not put client data in that. A document, name tools, each person's signature on file. That is what matters. And I want to be careful with my words here because we're not attorneys. We're not an IT cybersecurity company. Ask your attorney what your state requires. But practically, here's the difference. If you have nothing signed and something goes wrong, you're in a he said, she said, and the employee says nobody ever told them. You say, of course we told them, and now you're in a dispute about what somebody remembers being said in a meeting 18 months ago. That is a very hard position to defend, and it's the entire problem that we see coming in the coming days. If you have signed it, you're in a completely different conversation. You are not arguing about what people knew. You're looking at a document. Same thing on the other side of it. If you have ever explained to a client or an insurer, a regulator, or another party's lawyer what your company required, we had a signed acknowledgement from every employee naming the approved tools is a sentence you want to be able to say. Ignorance is a very hard position to defend when nothing was ever put in writing. Now, I want to be honest about the limits of this. A signature does not stop anybody. It is not a technical control. Somebody can sign in the form on Monday and paste your pricing model into a consumer tool on Tuesday. The signature is not the control. The signature is a record. You still need a sanction tool, or all you did was create paperwork. We will get to the tool in a minute. That was the part everybody talks about. Writing the policy, getting it signed, give to your team a real option. That is the advice you will hear from every IT company in the country right now, and it is good advice, and you should do it. Here's the part almost nobody is talking about. You can do all of that perfectly. Policy written, every employee signed, approved tool deployed. Your house is completely in order. And you still lose everything that matters. Because if somebody who does not work for you, your bookkeeper, your marketing agency, your outsourced IT, before you found us, the consultant with your files, the recruiter with your employee records, the fractional CFO with your entire P&L, every one of them already has your information. You gave it to them on purpose. That's the job. The question is what they're running it through. And I would bet you have never asked. Now let's get into that. There are two separate problems here, and I want to keep them apart because people mash them together and then the argument falls apart when somebody starts to push back. The problem one is your work walking out the door. Problem two is your data going somewhere you can't see. Those are not the same thing and they need different fixes. Now, let's take the first one, the logo swap. You hire an agency or a consultant or a firm, they do work for you. They build a process, a model, campaign, strategy, or report. They learn how your business actually works, your pricing logic, your margins, your client mix, the thing you figured out that your competitors do not have. And then they take that work, they change the name on top of it, and they deliver it to somebody else, possibly somebody that you directly compete against. Now, that is not new. That has been happening and in existence since consultants have been around. This is now at new speed. What used to take a smart consultant a week of rework now takes 4 minutes. restyle it, regenerate it, swap the logo, send it. But I want to be precise because one is a contract problem, not an AI problem. AI just made it fast. The fix is in the paper. Who owns the product? What confidentiality actually covers? Whether they are allowed to reuse anything they built for you, and whether their subcontractors and their tools are covered by the same terms. Because most confidentiality language was written before any of this existed, and do not mention it. Go look at your vendor agreements. I would guess that most of them have never read them since you signed them. And I would suggest almost none of them say a word about AI. Now, the second one. This is the one people get wrong. The second problem is completely different. This is your data going into a system that you did not configure, you do not see, and in plain language, here's the problem. A lot of these tools have free or cheaper consumer versions and a paid business version. And broadly speaking, the free version is free because you are the payment. Now I have to hedge this, and I mean it. The terms differ by product. They differ by tier, and they change. I'm not going to stand here and tell you which specific tool does what because it might be different next month, next week, per tool. What I'm telling you is there is a real difference between a version somebody pays for and a version they do not. And you do not need to know which one of your vendor is on. So picture this. You are paying an entire agency a professional rate. They're doing your work in $20 consumer subscription. Your client lists your positioning, your numbers going into a tier that was never built to hold somebody else's confidential information. You're paying for expertise and funding somebody else's tool with your own data. Now, here's what I want people to understand about the harm, because this is where I hear people overstate it. The risk is not usually that a competitor gets a recognizable photocopy of your material out of a model. That is not really how it works. And if somebody tells you that, they're probably overselling you. The real harm is that it left. Your information is now in a system you do not control, configured by somebody who does not work for you, under terms you've never read. You cannot prove where it went, you cannot prove who saw it, and you have lost the ability to enforce your own confidentiality terms because you cannot even describe what happened. This is the actual problem. It is quieter and then the scary version, and it is much harder to fix after the fact. The third thing, which is one that keeps up with, there is a version of this that is not about training at all. When a company plugs an AI tool into their systems, that tool usually needs deep access to do anything useful. It needs to read the database. It needs to reach the CRM. It needs tokens and permissions that let it move around, which means that tool is an authorized skeleton key to your systems, and it is only secure as the vendor who built it. There have been publicly reported incidents in the last year where attackers did not go after the companies at all. They went after the AI vendor and took the access the tool already had and walked straight into customer systems through the front door. They were not involved in any of those. I'm not only telling you what was reported publicly, but think about what that means. You did the security work. You have MFA. You have been monitoring. You have the whole stack. And when somebody in your marketing connected a tool to your CRM in about 90 seconds without telling anybody, now that security of your customer database is wherever that vendor security happens to be. You did not evaluate them, and you probably don't even know their name. So what do you actually do about it? Here's the conversation, and it is 4 questions. You have to call and send it in an email, and it takes about a minute. Question 1, are you using any AI tools on our account? Just ask. Most people have never been asked, and you will learn a lot from how they answer. Question 2, and this one is the one that most people forget. If you're not, are you ever planning to use AI? Because nobody today is a no in March, and then the answer is genuinely never. Fine. But put that in writing and have them sign it. And if they never intend to use it, signing that costs them absolutely nothing. Question 3. If the answer is yes, or maybe, or someday, then the terms change. You use ours. And I know how that sounds. A 10-person company telling a 50-person agency what tool to use. But listen to what you're actually asking. You're not asking them to change how they work. You're not asking them to stop using AI, and you shouldn't use it, because they will just continue to quietly do it, and you're back to where you started. You're asking them to do the work they're already doing on the information you're already sending them in a place where you can see it and govern it and put the official guardrails in. That reframe absolutely matters. You are not adding risk to this relationship. The risk is already there. You are moving it somewhere it can be governed. Question 4. Who pays? They do. And I want to be clear on how I say this, because I know how it can sound. It is not that we invented a way to bill your vendors. It is that the party creating the exposure should carry the cost of containing it. If a vendor wants to use AI on your data, the seat is part of their cost of serving you. Now, if you want to take that cost on for them, sure. But the same way that their software and their insurance is, they have to take that on too. Most of the time, we're talking about someone who just needs to run a report. It's not a big lift. What that actually looks like. Now, here's what we built and why. Most companies in our space sell you a tool. We're selling a platform and a partner relationship. And I think that is the fundamental difference. The whole ballgame right now. Because if you just buy a tool, here's what happens next. You hand it to somebody on your team, and now that person's job is to become an expert in AI. Agent builder, workflow specialist, prompt engineer, and train the whole entire team. How much time is that going to take up? And that is a real discipline. It's not a weekend thing. It's programming. There's nuance to it in the same way there's nuance between C# and JavaScript and everything else programming language. Plenty of people who work in technology have never built anything like this. Your accounting person probably has not. And now you're paying a good employee to slowly become a mediocre AI developer instead of doing their job you hired them for? That's not savings. That is a very expensive way to learn and potentially fail. And the money runs out faster than anybody expects. Uber went public with this a few months ago. Their CTO said that they burned through their entire 2026 budget for agentic coding tools in about 4 months. They ended up capping employees at $1,500 a month each. And here is the part I want you to hear. That company, when they did the review, they found no improvements on customer service, ride connections, or anything that was measurable in the P&L. Nobody misused anything. That was roughly 5,000 engineers at a technology company using tools exactly the way they were designed. At a company that had been telling them to use AI as much as possible. These tools do not bill like software used to. It is not a seat you buy once and you kind of forget about it and you're good. It is consumption-based. It moves with usage. Just buying the basic tool is just the first part of the cost. There's token excess usage per user, per agent, per system that you build. So if Uber's finance team could not forecast this with 5,000 engineers who build software for a living, I want you to be realistic about your odds of forecasting it with 6 people in a spreadsheet. That's not a skills problem, it's a structural one. And that is exactly the kind of thing that a partner absorbs when a tool does not. Now, why you should not pick a model right now. One more thing, and this is a strategic piece. So I tell people we're about 98 or 99 with this, with the internet. Think about who was winning the internet back then. Ask Jeeves, Yahoo. The names everybody assumed would be permanent because of course they would be. They were not what anybody would call winners today. Not because of the internet was a bad bet. The internet was a right bet. They just were not the right horse, and everybody was certain they were. I think we're in the same window. Some of those companies leading right now are burning enormous amounts of money to stay in front. And at some point, that has to show up in what they charge. The leader today may be too expensive to justify in 3 years. So committing your whole company in one model is a bet right now. And that is not a bet you have to make. There is a way out of that to not have to make that decision today. Build the layer so it's model agnostic. Marketing gets the model they like, accounting gets the one that works for them, engineering gets theirs. And when something better shows up 14 months from now, and it will, you get to move, not rebuild. Get the environment right, and the model becomes a choice instead of a commitment. Now, two things I want to say straight because if I skip them, you should not trust the rest. One, there are strings on this. Bringing an outside party into your environment means licensing needs to get right. Access, provision, and more importantly, to take away when engagement ends. There are real questions about who is responsible for what gets produced in your tenant. Do this with your counsel and your licensing in the room. It's not a checkbox. Two, whatever you have a vendor sign, your attorney writes it, not us. We build the environment and we will tell you the question to ask. We're not a law firm and we're not going to pretend to be one. Let me give you the free version because you can start this today and it costs you nothing. One, make a list. Every outside party that touches your information, bookkeepers, accountants, marketing, recruiters, consultants, outsourced IT, anybody with a login into your systems or has access to any reports and any information. Just write all those names down. Most owners have never seen that list in one place, and it's longer than you might think. Two, send one email. Same 4 questions. Are you using AI on our account? Which tools? What tier? And does our material train anything? Ask for that answer in writing. Written answers behave differently than verbal ones on both sides. 3, handle the answers. Nobody's using it and never will. Get that in writing. Using it or planning to. Now you know. And you cannot decide what you require. Vague or anybody else's, that's fine. That is your answer. That company that has not thought about it, and now you know how much of their business you want in their hands. 4, inside your own building, one document, naming the tools your people can use, signed by each person, and give them real option at the same time, because a rule without an alternative is just a rule people are going to break quietly. Now on to that document. Please do not pull a template off the internet and hand it to your team on Friday. Whatever you use is a starting point, but it's not legal advice. Your attorney should always look over absolutely everything, anything, before anybody signs it, internal, external, whatever. Now, I want to come back to that meeting. Nobody in that story did anything wrong. That is not what stayed with me. They ran a normal meeting. They said goodbye to the outside party. And then they talked to each other the way people talk to each other when guests have left. The tool did exactly what it was built to do. The only thing missing was a decision that somebody should have made months earlier about what runs in the room and who's allowed to turn it on. Every control you're going to need already had to exist before the meeting started. That is the whole thing. None of this works retroactively. And here's my read on where this goes, because I will label it as a read because I do not know, and neither does anybody else. I think we're going to see a wave of litigation on this in the next 6 to 12 months. Vendors and clients pointing at each other over data that got out through an AI tool. Nobody properly documented. And I think a lot of that is going to get in a precedent, and it's going to get set fast. And I do not think anybody can tell you today which way it's going to land. But I will tell you this, if you have something signed that your legal team looked over, it's going to be more likely that you're going to be on the right side of this. You are in complete different conversation than that company that has nothing with your employees and with your third-party vendors. Now, if you want help figuring that out and where you actually stand, take the AI readiness assessment on our site. That is i-NETT.ai, i-NETT.ai. And I want to tell you exactly what happens because I hate when people are vague about this. It is a conversation. We go through the AI usage policy piece, the questions to ask your own team, and the third-party vendor side. which is the part we just spent 20 minutes on and a part almost nobody has looked at. That's it. That's the whole ask. Getting this right now is going to prevent a lot of expensive mistakes later. That is really the only reason I made this episode. Now, thanks for spending time with me. If this got you thinking about a vendor you have not asked, go ask them. You do not need us for that part, but make sure your legal team has reviewed any and everything you're going to get signed. Now, here at i-NETT, your team focuses on growth. Our team's job is to make that happen. I am Nick Dreyfus. This has been The Digital Dilemma. I will see you next time.